Hey guys, today we're going to install the Eden Perfection LLC flat trigger into our Palmetto State Armory 5.7 handgun. So we've already got the pistol field stripped, we've got our frame sitting here, got the flat trigger. Tools we'll need are a 1/16 inch punch, 5/64ths, and 3/32 punches. And if you've got roll pin starter punches in those two sizes, that can help you on reassembly, but it's not necessary. Of course, we have our hammer, and then I'm going to use a roll of dense tape as a bench block. The punches here I got off Amazon. Typically, when I'm doing this here in the shop, I'm going to use my Grace USA punches, and I've got them in an arbor press. I'm actually pressing these pins out rather than driving them. But I figured using maybe a set of Amazon punches and the roll of tape for a bench block may be a little more indicative of the normal person's procedure. So that's what we're going to do, and I think we'll get along just fine. That being said, these two rear pins can be a bit of a bear to drive out, so you'll have to practice some patience on that part of the installation. First, we'll drive out the two rear pins in the frame. Again, these can be a bit of a bear, so be patient with these and be careful. I recommend driving them out from right to left. So we'll start with the rearmost pin, and I'm just going to hang it off the edge of my bench block a little bit here. We'll use the 3/32 punch. And there we go. So one pin removed, and then we will get our 5/64 punch. And here, rather than hanging off the end, now I'm going to support kind of like you normally would. And we'll drive it into the middle of that tape. As you can see, that pin came out fairly easily. Guys, that's because this gun has had a lot of work done on it, right? Those pins have been in and out many times as I design these triggers, so yours probably won't go that easy. Okay, once you get those pins driven out, it's pretty simple. You're just going to grab a hold of this rear slide guide assembly and lift it straight up. Okay, it comes out easily, and you can set that to the side. Next, we'll drive out the two front pins. Again, we're going to go from right to left. Here we'll use the 5/64 punch, and these come out real simple, guys. This is the easy part. 1 and 2. Okay, now that that's out, we can simply pull down on the takedown lever a little bit. That's going to help release this assembly, and then we're going to grab on the front here and on this trigger bar and kind of rock it back and forth, and it will start to lift up and out. And you may have to wiggle that trigger a little bit from the bottom side to get it to clear the spring that the mag catch works on. Make sure you don't let this assembly come out. There's a spring in there that'll go flying if you're not careful. So here we've got our trigger pack removed. We'll set this to the side, give us some room to work with. This little piece, don't lose that. That's what actuates the takedown cam. So we'll set that to the side. And here we've exposed the trigger pin. So what I'm going to do is take the 5/64 punch, get under the trigger spring, and then capture it with my thumb and lift it up. So now I've unhooked it from that roll pin. I can unhook it from the trigger bar and set it to the side. Now we'll take that 1/16 inch punch and just press that trigger pin out. You don't have to drive it out. It comes out really easy. All right. So now we've got that all apart and we're ready to go back in with our flat trigger. Before we install the trigger, I want to point out a few areas that may require fitting. We've worked really hard to avoid the need for fitting, but it is still a possibility. You've got manufacturing tolerances on the trigger bar, and of course on the frame and the rest of the components. And if those all work out against us, some fitting may be required. So first of all, this trigger comes to a point here in the back, and that point or that area is what is going to stop our over travel. It's going to hit the frame after you break the shot and stop the trigger from moving any farther. If that's hitting the frame before the shot breaks, you're going to need to remove a little bit of material from the back of the trigger area. I do recommend disassembling the trigger to do that, so that you're not going to mess up the trigger safety. So drive this roll pin out so you have free area to work with. And you really only need to work on the inside here, right? You're going to take off a little at a time and do test fitting. And you can avoid removing material from the outsides because of this curved surface. The middle is going to hit sooner, and so that's where you need to remove material. So that's one area to look for. Another is the trigger bar formation. So these are OEM trigger bars from Palmetto State Armory. Some of them don't have a true 90-degree bend here. Some of them may be a little less than 90 on this internal angle. And if that happens, this rear portion isn't going to actuate the sear quick enough to fire the gun. So you may need to check that angle and modify that slightly. We do check that before we ship the trigger out, but again, manufacturing tolerances with the rest of the platform could lead to a little fitting being needed. So that's why we recommend a gunsmith installation. All right, so we're going to take our flat trigger and put it back into the trigger housing. We're going to drop our trigger pin in. Again, this is easy, slides right into place. What I like to do is then put this bar back in place, and you need to make sure this little notch is on the top and facing forward. The angled portion should be on the back. That'll hold my trigger pin in as I rotate this around. Get our spring and hook it on to that notch, the trigger bar. And then we'll get one of our smaller punches, and I like to just hook it on and then use that punch to catch the end of that roll pin. You can see that, and then I'm just going to slide that spring down into place. So now our trigger is installed into the trigger housing. We can drop it down into the frame. Okay, we're going to set it right down in there. You kind of have to make sure that the trigger safety clears the spring here, so we'll get that in. Right, and you can see it's going down through that takedown lever. And you may have to kind of scoot it forward and then back to get it to clear the mag release spring. And it pops into place. Okay, you can do a quick check, kind of hold that down. You can see it moving back and forth like it should. I want you to take a look at the pins that we're going to install back into the trigger housing. You can see they have a little notch on the top and then a little taper on the end. So that notch in the top is held by a spring. That's what keeps the pin from moving out of the handgun. And that little taper on the end helps us guide that pin into the proper position. So we can take that pin and put the notch and the taper facing up. Okay, that's going to go right in like that. And as you can see, it almost presses all the way in. So we can get it most of the way, and then gently tapping with the polymer side of our hammer, we'll get that into place. We'll grab our other pin, same thing. There's the notch and the taper, that's going to face up. Push it in and gently tap it into place. And what you want to do is check and make sure that it didn't rotate on you. So we can see here that our rear pin, that tapered portion is straight up, and that's perfect. That's right where we want it. This one rotated a little bit, and it would be best to kind of push that out, turn the pin so that once it's fully assembled, it's straight up so that that spring is locking into that groove properly. We'll leave that for now because we're just showing the installation, but that is something you want to check. Next, we'll install the rear slide guide. We just want to make sure that the trigger bar sits down in the area it's supposed to be in, and pretty much it's going to do that all on its own. So if you drop this in from the top and the slide stop goes down into its groove, it's going to sit right in, and that trigger bar is going in right where it needs to be. So that's pretty straightforward. We'll go ahead and install our pins. I'm going to use my starter punches, and I'll start with the rearmost pin. Grab my other pin with the starter punch. We'll get it started. And that's as far as I'm going to go for now. I just want it to be holding the rear slide guide in place. I can kind of mess with the trigger and I can see that the firing pin safety is actuating. I can see that the sear is dropping. All that's working like it's supposed to, so that's looking pretty good. But we're going to go ahead and grab the slide and get it installed and do a function check. So we have good click there, good reset, good click. Okay, that's great. Now we'll check and make sure that the trigger safety is working. So I'm just going to try to pull the trigger rearward without depressing that safety. Sure enough, it stops like we want it to, and you can see down in there that it's acting like it should. So some guys asked, well, why don't you make this a lot less pre-travel? Because you can see the reset is still very short, like they are from the factory. And we do have some pre-travel there. And the reason for that is due to the internal workings of the gun. If I made it any shorter than that, you wouldn't be able to disassemble the slide. So what happens, get that off of there, is as you pull that trigger, we'll do it from this side, as you pull that trigger, you can see this firing pin block lever raising up. And I originally worked on an adjustable trigger that would allow you to bring that in pretty tight, but then as you can see, that sits in an upward position and won't allow you to remove the slide. So without drastic changes to the internals, you wouldn't be able to field strip your gun, and that's definitely not something we want. So we've got good function there. We're real happy with that. We can go ahead and drive those pins in and then do our final check. So we'll drive these pins in. Now remember, on this particular gun, it's been worked on a lot. This front pin is worn out, so it's going to go in easy. Rear pin a little more difficult. Once I get them flush, I'm going to take my roll pin punches, do a final seating, just so they're below flush. Our final check is going to be ensuring that the firing pin block is functioning properly. So to do that, we'll move this out of the way, and we're going to disassemble our slide. So we'll press on that rear pin, move the plate out of the way, and we'll avoid sending this into outer space. Remove the rear plate. And now we've exposed the rear of the slide. So we'll reinstall that on the gun. And now you can see that the firing pin, it's cocked, it's ready to shoot. The firing pin is protruding from that rear plate. And what we're going to do is go ahead and pull our trigger so that it's going to release that, and press that firing pin forward, maybe with our thumb. We want to just press it so that it's flush with that back plate. Right? So now the firing pin is flush with the back plate. Release the trigger and press the firing pin forward as far as it will go. I'll use one of the punches to do that. Okay, this should be hitting the firing pin block, and we'll test that by putting a little forward pressure on it as we pull the trigger. Perfect. So as the trigger pulled, hopefully you saw and heard that punch moved forward a little further. We can repeat the test. We'll pull the trigger, push that firing pin so that it's flush with the back, let up on the trigger, push it forward with the punch. Perfect. Okay, so it's doing exactly what we want it to do. Now we can reassemble the slide. So we'll remove the slide from the frame. And as you can see, this rear plate tried to come out, and that's okay. We'll just press it back into place, make sure it's flush, and we'll reassemble the slide. I'm going to use my punches to help me. You guys know how much of a bear these can be sometimes. So we'll get our back plate started. I'm going to use my starter punch to press that spring down. Sorry, I know my hands are in the way, but get that put back together, reinstalled on the gun. And there you have it. So we've successfully installed our flat trigger into our Palmetto State Armory 5.7 Rock handgun. We've done all of our safety checks, all of our function checks here on the bench. Everything's working great. Next stop is the range.